What is going on with Henry Louis Gates? What is going on with Cornel West? Who says that black leaders, serious black leaders, must be race transcending? How the hell are you going to be a serious black leader and be race transcending? But that's the dilemma of the assimilationists. They want race and not race at the same time. They want to organize black people based on blackness so that they can get rid of blackness. They want to use your black interests, your black feelings, and your black identity to advance their program so they can tell you later that blackness does not matter, that color has nothing to do with it. We are better off when we don't even refer to ourselves as black. We are better off when we amalgamate with the other people to the point of invisibility. If power is based on a collective identity, if power is based on social cooperation, if power is based on shared history and shared values and shared goals, how can you have power when you tell people that they cannot identify themselves on any basis whatsoever and that they should become individuals without any identity whatsoever? So consequently, this organization cannot empower black people. As a matter of fact, when we look at its history, we recognize immediately that this organization has not only been wrong-headed, it has actually been destructive to black people. And therefore, the assimilationist, moralist leadership must be destroyed and a new leadership structure built on its ruins. Yes. You don't want to deal with it, then stay with it and die. Yes. This is the deal. There's only one serious leadership structure available for African people. And that's the leadership struggle provided by African nationalism. It's the only way to go. There's no other way around. You must understand, but see, some people have deceived you about nationalism. What nationalism is and what it isn't. Some people have told you that nationalism means race hatred. That it means, one race being superior to another race. It's the same kind of joke that they tried to tell you about Afrocentrism being the mirror image of what? Eurocentrism. It's a joke. It's not true. Understand what nationalism is. Nationalism is an ideology of 1,000 faces. While we may have a similar sense of what it is, it involves no one definition that can be agreed on. No two types of nationalism are the same, ladies and gentlemen. And we have to recognize that. Nationalism is very important. Nationalism, allied with the sense of nation, offers unity and mutual support, solidarity and identity, structure and cohesion to people who otherwise may feel atomized, insecure, vulnerable, and bereft of stabilizing norms, values, and affirmative social relations. Through nationness and nationalism, the individual transcends his existential aloneness and shares in the much broader virtues and power of the group. His power and that of the group to which he belongs are one. And let us look at nationalism. Nationalism creates focused power which enables the people to achieve ends, which is separate individuals pursuing their own unrelated self-interested ends they could never achieve. The power generated by nationalism is the bane and harbinger of destruction for those who wish to establish or maintain imperial control over other people. What are we saying here then? That some nations may use nationalism as a means of unifying themselves, of creating self-determination, and after doing so, to fill themselves with an ideology of racial superiority and an ideology of manifest destiny, and using their nationalism combined with the sense of manifest destiny and racial superiority, enslave other people and colonize other people. And this is the essence of European nationalism. But the essence of African nationalism is a different type and of a different kind. And we have to understand that clearly before someone confuses us. Black or African nationalism is a nationalism of liberation and self-determination, not of conquest and domination. It is premised on the precept that blacks and African people shall not be the subjects of another people, nor should they subject themselves to other people. That black peoples and nations should exercise the full rights to develop and utilize their material, human, and spiritual resources primarily for their own benefit and well-being, and for the benefit and well-being of others as they see fit. That they are not the inferiors of others and not destined by God or man to exist in the forced servitude of others. And when and if and for whatever and however long they may be willfully subjected to the domination of others, they are commissioned and they are obligated by their inalienable rights as human beings to freedoms to resist such domination and overthrow it as soon as humanly possible. So when we talk about an African nationalism, we are not talking about a nationalism of racial superiority, a nationalism where we intend to conquer and rule and enslave another people. An African nationalism is needed to liberate us from the nationalism of others. Nationalism evokes a sense of cohesion and belonging in a people that permits them to cooperate and to coordinate their activities and to align themselves in order to achieve their national and individual freedom.
Chapter 1, the Negro and Language. I ascribe a basic importance to the phenomenon of language. That is why I find it necessary to begin with this subject, which should provide us with some of the elements in the colored man's comprehension of the dimension of the other. For it is implicit that we speak is to exist absolutely for the other. The black man has two dimensions, one with his fellows and the other with the white man. A Negro behaves differently with a white man and with another Negro. That this self-division is a direct result of colonist subjugation is beyond question. No one would dream of doubting that its major artery is fed from the heart of those various theories that have tried to prove that the Negro is a stage in the slow evolution of monkey into man. Here is objective evidence that expresses reality. But when one has taken cognizance of this situation, when one has understood it, one considers the job completed. How can one then be deaf to the voice rolling down the stages of history? What matters is not to know the world, but to change it. This matters appallingly in our lifetime. To speak means to be in a position to use a certain syntax, to grasp the morphology of this or that language, but it means above all to assume a culture to support the weight of a civilization. Since the situation is not one way only, the statement of it should reflect the fact. Here, the reader is asked to concede certain points that, however unacceptable they may seem in the beginning, will find the measure of their validity in the facts. The problem that we confront in this chapter is this: the Negro of the Antilles will be proportionately whether this is, he will come closer to being a real human being in direct ratio to his mastery of the French language. I'm not unaware that this is one of man's attitudes face to face with being. A man who has a language consequently possesses the world expressed and implied by that language. What we are getting at becomes plain. Mastery of language affords remarkable power. Paul Valery knew this, for he called language the God-gone ashtray of the flesh. In a work now in preparation, I propose to investigate this phenomenon. For the moment, I want to show why the Negro of the Antilles, whoever he is, has always to face the problem of language. Furthermore, I will broaden the field of this description, and through the Negro of the Antilles include every colonized man. Every colonized people, in other words, every people in whose soul An inferiority complex has been created by the death and burial of its logical cultural originality, finds itself face to face with the language of the civilizing nation. That is, when the culture of the mother country. The colonizer is elevated above his jungle status in proportion to his adaptation of the mother country's cultural standards. He becomes whiter as he renounces his blackness, his jungle. In the French colonial army, and particularly in the Senegalese regiments, the black officers serve first of all as interpreters. They are used to convey the master's orders to their fellows, and they too enjoy a certain position of power. There is the city, there is the country, there's the capital, there's the providence. Apparently, the problem in the mother country is the same. Let us take the Linois in Paris. I said that wrong. I know I said that wrong. Let us take the Linois in Paris. He boasts of the quiet of his city, the intoxicating beauty of the quays of the Rhone, the splendor of the plane trees, and those other things that fascinate people who have nothing to do. If you meet him again when he has returned from Paris, and especially if you do not know the capital, he will never run out of its Parises. Paris, city of light, the scene, the little garden restaurants, know Paris and die. The process repeats itself with the man of Martinique. First of all, his island, Basse Point, Margot, Gros Morne, and opposite the imposing Fort de France. Then, and this is the important point beyond this island, the Negro who knows the mother country is a demigod. In this connection, I offer a fact that must have struck my compatriots. Many of them, after stays of varying length in metropolitan France, go home to be defied. The most eloquent form of ambivalence is adopted toward them by the native, the one who never crawled out of his hole, the Bitaco. The black man who has lived in France for a length of time returns radically changed. To express it in genetic terms, his phenotype undergoes a definitive and absolute mutation. Even before he had gone away, one could tell from the almost aerial manner of his carriage that new forces had been set in motion. When he met a friend or an acquaintance, his greeting was no longer the wide sweep of the arm. With the great reserve, our new man bowed slightly. The habitually raucous voice hinted at a gentle inner stirring as of rustling breezes. For the Negro knows that over there in France, there is a stereotype of him that will fasten onto him at the Pier Le Havre or Marseille. I come from Martinique. It is the first time I've come to France. He knows that what the poets call the divine gurgling, and they're talking about Creole, is only a halfway house between pidgin, and this is what it says, pidgin nigger in French. The middle class in the Antilles never speak Creole except for their servants. In school, the children of Martinique are taught to scorn the dialect. One avoids Creolisms. Some families completely forbid the use of Creole, and mothers ridicule their children for speaking it. My mother waiting a son to keep in mind. If you don't know your history lesson, you will not go to mass on Sundays in Sunday clothes. That child will be a disgrace to the family. That child will be our curse. Shut up, I told you, you must speak French. The French of French. The Frenchman's French. French, French. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, here reading you Frantz Fanon's book, Black Skin, White Mask. We did the votes. I put the post up. We did the votes, and Black Skin, White Mask came out with the most votes over our other books, which was COINTEL Profiles, The $40 Million Slave, as well as, where was it? Yeah, COINTEL Profiles, $40 Million Slave, and Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. Those were the books that were a part of the choices, the 4 choices that we had, and Black Skin, White Mask came out on top with 40% of the votes. So here we are breaking down Black Skin, White Mask, and we're starting with chapter 1, page 17, chapter 1, talking about language and assimilation, right? The Negro and language, how the Negro assimilates through language, and how language is a powerful tool, right? So language is tied to power. So that's basically what we're getting at. That's one of the focuses of this chapter, right? Is how language is tied to power, identity, and colonial domination, right? Especially focusing on how Black people in French colonies internalized inferiority through the use of the colonizer's language. And remember, I read that he's not only just talking about the Black people in the Antilles, the French colonies, because he's using them as an example of Black people throughout the diaspora, especially those of us who are speaking the language of our colonizers. But he's also talking about the use of the colonizer's language. The idea that if I don't speak a perfect version of this colonizer's language, then I am therefore inferior to the colonizer. And that those Black people want to make sure that they have the best white proximity, because this is all about assimilation, is about white proximity. That's what we're talking about, assimilating through language, right? And you see in the opening clip, Dr. Amos Wilson giving us a breakdown of what assimilation is, the juxtaposing assimilation and Black nationalism, because assimilation is the imposition of white supremacy, white nationalism, right? And Black nationalism is the antithesis of assimilation, because Black nationalism is one of the things that Frantz Fanon is talking about, is holding on to your key cultural traits, not giving up your key cultural traits for the traits of the master. So some of the key points that we're going to be covering in this chapter are: language is power and identity, the internalization of inferiority, the link between language and alienation, the role of education, the Negro as object in language, the psychological effect of language, and mimicry is not freedom, right? And so let's start with language and power and identity, since we already kind of started talking about that, right? Because how does the Black man identify within the colonies of their master, of their colonizers, or in our case, our slave masters on the plantations, or in the lands of our oppressors, in the lands of the white supremacists, in the lands of ones who enslaved us, right? How do we exist? How do we express ourselves? What cultural expressions are we using, and have we developed, right? Because language, let's start with language, is power and identity, right? Because Fanon's argument is that to speak a language is to assume a culture and to take on the civilization. And I agree with him, right? Because to assume the language of your colonizer means that you have just been that colonized, because you are now speaking the language of those who have defeated and dominated you. You're not speaking your original language. So therefore, it is the assuming of the culture of the civilization of people who have dominated you. When a Black person speaks French, especially proper French, or in our terms, proper English, not clear English, not being able to clearly speak, but to speak proper English, they are attempting to align themselves with whiteness, with civilized identity and power, right? So what does it mean to sound white or talk white? So I realized that my definition and my conception of talking white was vastly different from other people. So growing up, my idea of talking white was always, you sound white, the tonation. Hi, I'm a white guy. And what are you like? Like, you're not a Black person who can clearly speak and pronounce their words, but a Black person who actually sound white. Because another aspect of this is the perfection of the language. And like was reading earlier, with the example of the Creole, speaking the Creole, for us, it'll be speaking Ebonics, speaking African-American vernacular, right? So what y'all doing over there? You ain't even seen me today, man. You ain't even seen me today, right? You haven't even seen me today, right? Being able to not fit, to be around white people and talk regular black folk. Like I tell people all the time, when I get around white people, I can talk like a regular black person. Because for one, I know how to speak. Like I can speak clearly. I know how to pronounce and enunciate my words, but I say yin and all that other stuff there. Y'all ain't talking about none. All the ways I talk around black people, I can still talk around white people because I, as an individual, don't have that inferiority complex anymore. I used to have it, but I don't have it anymore because I used to have and I get it. I used to have the mindset of I have to speak this way so white people won't think I'm ignorant but then they come back and hit you with, oh, you speak so well, as if I'm not supposed to speak well. But then remember, I already internalized the idea of I'm not supposed to speak well, right? So I'm glad I don't have that anymore because now I'm more comfortable in who I am as a black man and I can speak my regular way. You ain't even seen me over there that day, you know what I'm talking about? And I can say that around white folk and it's all good. But what he's getting at is the assimilation portion is to believe that to speak the way you natively speak as a group of people or within your culture around others, especially your oppressors, is the internalized inferiority complex and the catalyst to the assimilation of the black man via the language of their oppressors. So let's get back into it because we got a lot to break down, a lot to go to because we're going to hit these points. And so picking back up on page 20, the second to last paragraph on page 20. So, oh yeah, remember, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and share. Make sure y'all send this to a friend of a friend of a friend to make sure everybody know about what's going on here on the Shoulders of Giants as we read this Black Skin, White Mask by Frantz Fanon. So let's pick back up. Yes, I must take great pains with my speech because I shall be more or less judged by it. With great contempt, they will say of me, he doesn't even know how to speak French. And like to say, you don't even speak correct. He don't talk right. Why you talk like that? Why you talk like an inferior person, as if speaking English the way the white man speak it? Because why all white people don't even speak English the same way? All white people don't even speak proper English. I was just watching the show the other day. They're showing different white groups of white people from around the world in different white countries who all speak English a different way, and it ain't the same. There is no proper English that we should be speaking. The idea is to convey a clear message. But I don't have to speak like a white person to convey a clear message. In any group of young men in the Antilles, the one who expresses himself well, who has mastered the language, is inordinately feared. Keep an eye on that one. He is almost white. In France, one says, he talks like a book. In Martinique, he talks like a white man, right? So I just covered that, right? The sound, for me, it's the tonation. It's not the fact that you can speak clearly. It's the tonation of how you speak. The Negro arriving in France will react against the myth of the R-eating man of Martinique. He will become aware of it, and he will really go to war against it. He will practice not only rolling his R, but embroidening it. Fugitively observing the slightest reaction of others, listening to his own speech, suspicious of his own tongue, a wretchedly lazy organ, he will lock himself in his room and read aloud for hours, desperately determined to learn diction. Recently, an acquaintance told me a story. A Martinique Negro landed at Le Havre. I'm bear with me with these French words, Le Havre, and went into a bar. With the utmost of self-confidence, he called, "Waiter, bring me a beer." Here in a genuine intoxication, resolved not to fit the myth of the nigger who eats his R's, he had acquired a fine supply of them, but allocated it badly. There's a psychological phenomenon that consists in the belief that the world will open to the extent to which foreigners are broken down. Imprisoned on his island, lost in an atmosphere that offers not the slightest outlet, the Negro breathes in the appeal of Europe like the pure air, for it must be admitted, Aimé Césaire was generous in his Cahiers d'un return au pays national. This town of Fort de France is truly flat stranded, lying there naked to the sun, that flat crawling city stumbling over its own common sense, widened by its load of endlessly repeated crosses, pettish at its destiny, voices thwarted in every direction, incapable of feeding on the juices of its soil, blocked, cut off, confined, divorced of fauna and flora. And Amy Cesar was a writer. He was a Caribbean writer. Cesar's description of it is anything but poetic. And he's describing experiences, like Black experiences in white spaces, especially like France. Cesar's description of it is anything but poetic. It is understandable then when at the news that he is getting into France, quiet like someone who is, the colloquial phrase is, getting the start in life. The Black man is jubilant and makes up his mind to change. There is no thematic pattern. However, his structure changes independently of any reflective process. In the United States, there's a center directed by Pierce and Williamson. It's called Peckham. These authors have shown that in married couples, a biochemical alteration takes place in the partners, and it seems they have discovered the presence of certain hormones in the husband of a pregnant woman. It will be equally interesting, and there are plenty of subjects for the study to investigate the modifications of body fluids that occur in Negroes when they arrive in France, or simply to study through tests of psychic changes both before they leave home and after they have spent a month in France. What are by common consent called the human sciences have their own drama. Should one postulate a type of human reality and describe its psychic modalities only through deviations from it? Or should one not rather strive unremittingly or for a concrete and ever new understanding of man? And now, getting that, remember now, one of the other things that he's getting at, one of our other key points, is the internalization of inferiority, internalizing it, right? Black people from colonized societies are taught to see their own cultures, dialects, and languages as inferior or primitive. So I must perfect my behavior to be accepted by the dominant society. And if I don't perfect my behavior, they will never accept me. They will never let me in, because they exist this way, they behave this way, they talk this way, they think this way, they dress this way, they laugh this way. So if I'm a Black person and I fall out laughing and run across the room and come back, I'm uncouth. The cultures, right? Now remember, the main catalyst through this is the language. So if I slip up like, man, shoot, man, they ain't talking about nothing, that means I'm inferior. And see, this is something that we have to get past. So because I say they ain't talking about, they ain't never tell me nothing, that doesn't mean that I'm unintelligent. It just means the way I communicate is totally different from you. Because a person's use of language, it's not even the use of language that determines a person's intelligence. It's how they use the information they have to solve the problems that they have. At the end of the day, that's intelligence. How do you use the information that you have to solve your problems? If you can figure out how to do that, then you're intelligent, right? So speaking perfect French, or the inability to speak perfect French, or the inability to speak perfect English, reinforces the deep inferiority complex, especially if we are deeply entrenched in the media. We're deeply influenced by the media. Even through reading certain books, like he talked about the example of the man locking himself in his room, reading books to perfect his language, to perfect his diction, rather, to perfect his tongue, to get his tongue from being lazy, to speak proper French, or in our case, to speak proper English. It is to be accepted by those who represent the dominant class. So when one reads that after the age of 29, a man can no longer love and that he must wait until he is 49 before his capacity for effect revives. One feels the ground gave way beneath one. The only possibility of regaining one's balance is to face the whole problem. For all these discoveries, all these inquiries lead only to one direction: to make man admit that he is nothing, absolutely nothing, and that he must put an end to the narcissism on which he relies in order to imagine that he is different from the other animals. This amounts to nothing more nor less than the man's surrender. The black man, the assimilation is to shed the black man of his primitive nature. The white man are here to save us. They're here to help us speak better, think better, walk better, talk better, eat better, live better, because our nature is primitive, right? And so that leads to the link between language and alienation, right? He explains, Franz Fanon explains that the black individual who adopts the colonizer's language often becomes alienated from their own people. And we can see that through these diaspora wars, right? We can see that through these diaspora wars. Those of us who have adopted other languages, we are alienated. Now, that was the whole process of the making of the slave in America, is to totally alienate the American slave, the American slave in the United States, to totally alienate that slave from his culture, from his roots. Rip the roots out of the ground. The tree has no roots, so the tree can't grow. Plant the tree in the soil of its oppressor, so when it grows to suit and to benefit the oppressor. So therefore, our roots are not connected to our homeland anymore. And therefore, we have been alienated from Africa, right? They live in a white mass, using the colonizer's language and worldview, which distance them from their native identity and community. And now, remember, he's not just talking about Black people in these French colonies. And I'm not just talking about Black people in America. It's Black people around the world, even Black people in Africa who speak the white man's language. Various forms of the white man's language. Even Black people in Central and South America who speak the white man's language. If you're speaking English, if you're speaking French, if you're speaking Dutch, if you're speaking Spanish, you're speaking Portuguese, like some of the main languages, you're speaking your colonizer's language. And therefore, you have been alienated from your homeland. And we do wear a white mask. But the key is to take the white mask off. That's why we're learning is to take the white mask off. Having reflected on that, I grasp my narcissism with both hands, and I turn my back on the degradation of those who would make man a mere mechanism. If there can be no discussion on the philosophical level, that is the plane of the basic need of human reality, I'm willing to work on the psychological level. In other words, the level of the failures in the sense in which one speaks of engine failures. The Black man who arrives in France changes because to him the country represents the tabernacle. He changes not only because it is from France that he received his knowledge of Montesquieu, Rousseau, and Voltaire, but also because France gave him his physicians, his department heads, his innumerable little functionaries, from the sergeant major 15 years in service to the policeman who was born in Pensionaries. I pronounced that wrong. I don't know. There's a kind of magic vault of distance. And the man who is leaving next week for France creates round himself a magic circle in which the worlds Paris, Marseille, Sorbonne, Pigalle become the keys to the vault. He leaves for the pier, and the amputation of his being diminishes as the silhouette of his ship grows clearer. And the eyes of those who have come to see him off can read the evidence of his own mutation, his power. Goodbye bandana, goodbye straw hat. Now that we have got him on the dock, let him sail. He shall We shall see him again. For the moment, let us go to welcome one of those who are coming home. The newcomer reveals himself at once. He answers only in French, and often he no longer understands Creole. There's a relevant illustration in folklore. After several months of living in France, a country boy returns to his family, noticing a farm implement. He asks his father, "And oh, don't pull that kind of thing on me, peasant. Tell me, what does one call that apparatus?" His father replies by dropping the tool on the boy's feet, and the amnesia vanishes. Remarkable therapy. There's a newcomer, then he no longer understands the dialect. He talks about the opera, which he may never have seen except from a distance, but above all, he adopts a critical attitude towards his compatriots. Confronted with the most trivial occurrence, he becomes an oracle. He is the one who knows. He betrays himself in his speech. At the savannah, where the young men of Fort de France spend their leisure, the spectacle is revealing. Everyone immediately awaits the newcomer to speak. As soon as school days end, they will go to the savannah. This savannah seems to have its own poetry. Imagine a square about 600 feet long and 125 feet wide. Its sides bound by worm-eaten tarmit trees, one end marked by a huge war memorial, the nation's gratitude to its children, the other by the Central Hotel, a miserable tract of uneven cobbles, pebbles that roll away under one's feet. And amid all this, 300 or 400 young fellows walking up and down, greeting one another, grouping. No, they never form groups. They go on walking. How's it going? Okay. How's it going with you? Okay. And that goes on for 50 years. Yes, this city is deplorably played out. So it is life. They meet and talk. And if the newcomer soon gets the floor, it is because they were waiting for them. First of all, to observe his manner. The slightest departure is seized on, picked apart, and in less than 48 hours, it has been retailed all over Fort de France. There is no forgiveness when one who claims a superiority falls below the standard. Let him say, for instance, "It was not my good fortune when in France to observe mounted policemen, and he is done for." Only one choice remains to him: throw off his Parisianism or die of ridicule. For there's no forgetting, when he marries, his wife will be aware that she is marrying a joke, and his children will have a legend to face and to live down, right? And so now we're getting at the inculcation of the black man into the colonizer's culture, right? So now we're using education as a vehicle, right? Because that's one of the key points, the role of education. French colonial education was designed to indoctrinate black students into white culture, just like American white United States culture was created to indoctrinate black children into American culture, for us to become American citizens, to assimilate fully as Americans, and to forget our blackness. And remember, going to what Dr. Amos Wilson was saying, to get to a point to where we're not even recognizing and celebrating our blackness, because we see ourselves as only American and not as black people in America. And people say, well, why are you always talking about race and hitting on race? We got to remember, we didn't start this race shit. We didn't start this shit. We didn't create the system of racism. We didn't create the system of white supremacy. We are victims of it, and we live in it and we live here in these systems because of it. So you can't create the system and let the system go on for 400 or 500 years and then wag your finger at us and be like, why y'all always talking about race? Well, you all created this dynamic that we exist in. So race will never go anywhere because you created it in this system of racism and white supremacy. Because if you want us to stop talking about race and the system of racism and white supremacy, and we will no longer have to talk about race, right? So success in school often meant rejecting one's own heritage and striving to emulate whiteness. And that, if you've never read the book Crow Dog, I have it on my shelf over here. The book Crow Dog is a book about the Lakota Nation, and it's a good book about this assimilation and how education was used to help the Lakota Nation. The ones who were educated in the white schools really reject their own culture, their own heritage, their own ways, and really adopt the whiteness, adopt the white man's ways, and it really still didn't help them keep their land or their lives, right? But let's also talk about the Negro as object in language, right? In French literature and popular culture, the Negro is objectified and stereotyped. The Negro is the inferior one. The Negro is the one to be ridiculed, the one to be stepped on. The Negro is the caricature. The Negro is the cartoon, right? And then the problem is nowadays, 2025, and Black America have become the caricatures. We have become the stereotypes. And those caricatures and stereotypes have not only been realized, they are being supported and promoted. So the assimilation is happening because we think Black hood nigga culture is something authentic to us when it's really just promotion of the assimilation into white culture, how we have adopted the degenerative forms of white culture and then try to empower ourselves through it, only to degenerate ourselves even more, right? Because now Fanon points out that Black identity is often defined through the white gaze with negative or exotic connotations, sexy red, or all of this stuff, the white gaze. Hey, well, white people see it like this and white people see it like that. White people promote it like this. White people said this, white people like this. White ice is colder. And it ain't. Once we take off the white mask, once we take off the white contact lenses, and we're able to see Black, we're able to see better. We can be a group of people who can move more toward the nationalism, more toward empowerment through Black concepts and Black power and Black culture, rather than the white gaze. So, what is the origin of this personality change? What is the source of this new way of being? Every dialect is a way of thinking. De Morte and Pichon said, and the fact that the newly returned Negro adopts a language different from that of the group into which he was born is evident of his dislocation and separation. And that's so Professor D. Wersterman in The African Today on page 331 says that the Negro's inferiority complex is particularly intensified amongst the most educated who must struggle with it unceasingly. Their way of doing so, he adds, is frequently naive. The wearing of European clothes, whether rags or the most up-to-date style, using European furniture and European forms of social intercourse, adorning the native language with European expressions, using bombastic phrases in speaking or writing a European language. All these contribute to a feeling of equality with the European and his achievements. On the basis of the other studies and my own personal observations, I want to try to show why the Negro adopts such a position, peculiar to him with respect to European language. Let me point out once more that the conclusions I have reached pertain to the French Antilles, and at some time I'm not aware that the same behavior patterns obtain in every race that has been subjected to colonization. But we do know what's happening to the Black race, right? I have known, and unfortunately, I still know people born in Dahomey or the Congo who pretend to be natives of the Antilles. I have known, and I still know Antilles Negroes who are annoyed when they are suspected of being Senegalese. This is because the Antilles Negro is more civilized than the African. That is, he is closer to the white man, and this difference prevails not only in the back streets, but on the boulevards, but also in the public service and in the army. What I said, then I tell y'all this Saturday. Then I tell y'all this Saturday on my live stream that a lot of this diaspora wars come down to white proximity, Black people fighting for white proximity. What I told you. Any Antilles Negroes who performed his military service in the Senegalese infantry regiment is familiar with this disturbing climate. On one side, he has the Europeans, whether born in his own country or in France. And on the other, he has the Senegalese. I remember a day when, in the midst of combat, we had to wipe out a machine gun nest. The Senegalese were ordered to attack 3 times, and each time they were forced back. Then one of them wanted to know why the Tobabs did not go into action. At such times, no one No one longer knows whether one is Tobab or native. And yet, many Antilles Negroes see nothing to upset them in such European identification. On the contrary, they find it altogether normal. They would they would be all we need to be taken for niggers. The Europeans despise the Senegalese and the Antilles Negroes rules the black roost as its unchallenged master. Admittedly, as an extreme example, I offer a detail that is at least amusing. I was talking recently with someone from Martinique who told me with considerable resentment that some Guadeloupe Negroes were trying to pass as Martinicians. But he added the lie was rapidly discovered because they were more savage than we are, which again means that they are farther away from the white man. It is said that the Negro loves to jabbers. In my own case, when I think of the word jabber, I see a gay group of children calling and shouting for this the sake of calling and shouting, children in the midst of play to the degree to which play can be considered an imitation of life. The Negro loves to jabber, and from this theory, it is not a long road that leads to a new proposition. The Negro is just a child. The psychoanalyticists have a fine start here, and the term orality is soon heard. But we have to go further. The problem of language is too basic to allow us to hope to state it all here. Piaget's remarkable studies have taught us to distinguish the various stages in the mastery of language, and Gleb and Goldstein have shown us the functions of language is also broken into periods and steps. What interests us here is the black man confronted by the French language. We're trying to understand why the Antilles Negroes is so fond of speaking French and why the American Negro is so fond of speaking English, right? And well, never mind, because we don't have no other language to speak, so never mind. Jean-Paul Sartre and Orphée Noire, which prefaces the anthology de la Nouvelle Pensée Négre et Mégaché. I don't know. I messed that up, but tells us that the black poet would turn against the French language, but that does not apply in the Antilles. Here I share an opinion of Michael Lyris, who, discussing Creole, wrote not so long ago. Even now, despite the fact that it is a language that everyone knows more or less, though only the illiterate use it to the exclusion of French, Creole seems already predestined to become a relic eventually. One public education, however slow its progress, impeded by the insufficiency of school facilities everywhere, the paucity of reading matter available to the public, and the fact that the physical sale of living is too often low, has become common enough among the disinherited class of the population. And the author adds, in the case of the poets that I am discussing here, there's no question of their deliberately becoming Antillians on the provincial picturesque model by employing a dead language which furthermore is utterly devoid of all external radiance regardless of its intrinsic qualities. It is rather a matter of asserting imposition to white men filled with the worst racial prejudices, whose arrogance is more and more plainly demonstrated to be unfounded, the integrity of their personalities, right? And now we get into the psychological effect of language, right? When black people try to speak French like white people, they are not just trying to communicate, they are attempting to become white mentally and socially because whiteness is the standard. When you are colonized and then after colonization, you take the next step to assimilate. And even the colonizers make sure that the assimilation process is happening. That's the whole idea that I have to become white. We know these Negroes. We see these Negroes all the time. Some of us are these Negroes. Some of us have been these Negroes, right? But the key is not to stay where you are. The key is to grow and glow, right? The mind of the black man throughout the world has been socially engineered to a subordinate position. All 9 areas of human activity: education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, politics, war, sex, and religion. All 9 areas, including health, and some people say culture. All areas of human activity have been dominated by white supremacists. So that means even the language that we speak has been colonized. Well, actually, we're speaking the colonist language, but even for a lot of Black people, even on the continent of Africa, the language that you speak has been colonized. You're speaking French, you're speaking English, you're speaking Dutch, you're speaking Arabic languages. Anytime we're not speaking our indigenous language, we have been colonized. And then the perfection, to take the next step to try to perfect the language in such a way to be accepted by the white man is a whole nother form of the social engineering and the attempt to be accepted by the white man. The result in a split identity, one that mimics whiteness while representing Blackness. And so we see that a lot from the fake leaders that we have, those people who are in those leadership positions who we never get any tangible outcomes from. They look Black, but they behave white. Black skin, white mask. They look Black, but they behave white. Black skin, white mask. If there is, for instance, a Gilbert Gradient who writes in dialect, it must be admired that he is a rarity. Let us point out furthermore that the poetic merit of such creation is quite dubious. There are, in contrast, real works of art translated from the Pure or Wolof dialects of Senegal. And I have found great interest in following the linguistic studies of Cheikh Anta Diop. Nothing in short of the Antilles, the language spoken officially is French. Teachers keep a close watch over the children and make sure they do not use Creole. Let us not mention the ostensible reasons, and it would seem that then that the problem is this: in the Antilles, as in Brittany, there's a dialect and there is the French language. But this is false. For the Bretons do not consider themselves inferior to the French people. The Bretons have not been civilized by the white man. By refusing to multiply our elements, we take the risk of not setting a limit to our field, for it is essential to convey to the Black man that an attitude of rupture has never saved anyone. While it is true that I have to throw off an attacker who is strangling me because I literally cannot breathe, the fact remains solely on the psychological foundation. To the mechanical problem of respiration, it would be unsound to graft a psychological element, the impossibility of expansion. Where is to say, purely and simply this: when a bachelor of philosophy from the Antilles refuses to apply for certification as a teacher on the ground of his color, I say that philosophy has never saved anyone. When someone else strives and strains to prove to me that Black men are as intelligent as white men, I say that intelligence has never saved anyone. And that is true, for the philosophy and intelligence are invoked to proclaim the equality of men. They have also been employed to justify the extermination of them. Before going any farther, I find it necessary to say certain things. I'm speaking here on the one hand of alienated, duped Blacks, and on the other hand of the less alienated, duping and duped whites. If one hears a satire of the Cardinal Verder declare that the outrage of the color problem has survived far too long, one can conclude only that their position is normal. Anyone can amass references and quotations to prove that color prejudice is indeed imbecility and an iniquity that must be eliminated. Satire begins Orphe Noir thus: what then did you expect when you unbound the gag and had muted those black mouths? That they would chant your praises? Did you think that when the heads that our fathers had forcibly bowed down to the ground were raised again, you would find adoration in their eyes? I do not know, but I say that he who looks into my eyes for anything but a perpetual question will have to lose his sight, neither recognition nor hate. And if I cry out, it would not be a black cry. No, from the point of view adopted here, there is no black problem. Or at any rate, if there is one, it concerns the whites only accidentally. It is a story that takes place in darkness, and the sun that is carried within me must shine into the smallest crannies. Dr. H.L. Gordon, attending physician at the Maritime Mental Hospital in Nairobi, declared in an article in the East African Medical Journal, a highly technical skill examination of a series of 100 brains of normal natives have found naked eye and microscopic facts indicative of inherent new brain inferiority. Quantitatively, he added the inferiority amounts to 14.8%. It has been said that the Negro is the link between monkey and man, meaning, of course, white man. And only on page 108 of his book, The Sir Alan Burns, come to the conclusion that we are unable to accept as scientifically proved the theory that the black man is inherently inferior to the white, or that he comes from a different stock. Let me add that it would be easy to prove the absurdity of the statements such as this. It is laid down in the Bible that the separation of the white and black races will be continued in heaven as on earth. And those blacks who are admitted into the kingdom of heaven will find themselves separately lodged in certain of those many mansions of our Father that were mentioned in the New Testament. Or this, we are the chosen people. Look at the color of our skins. The others are black or yellow. That is because of their sins. Yes, as you can see, by calling on humanity, on the belief in dignity, one love, on charity, it would be easy to prove or to win the admission that the black is the equal of the white. But my purpose is quite different. What I want to do is help the black man free himself of the arsenal of complexes that have been developed by the colonial environment. Mr. Akil, who teaches at the Lycée du Parc in Lyon, once during a lecture told of a personal experience. It was a universally known experience. It is a rare Negro living in France who cannot duplicate it. Being a Catholic, Achilles took part in a student pilgrimage. A priest observing the black face in his flock said to him, "You go, way big Savannah, what for you and come long us?" Very politely, Achilles gave him a truthful answer, and it was not the young fugitive from the savannah who come off the worst. Everyone laughed at the exchange, and the pilgrimage proceeded. But if we stop right here, we shall see that the fact that the priest spoke pidgin nigger leads to certain observations. One, I know the blacks. I know the blacks. They must be spoken to kindly. Talk to them about the country. It's all they know. It's all they knowing how to talk to them. For instance, I am not at all exaggerating. A white man addressed a Negro behaves exactly like an adult with a child and starts smirking, whispering, patronizing, coozing. It is not one white man I've watched, but hundreds, and I have not limited my investigation to any one class. But if I may claim an essentially objective position, I've made a point of observing such behavior in physicians, policemen, employers. I shall be told by those who overlook my purpose that I should have directed my attention elsewhere, that there are white men who do not fit my description. To these objections, I replied that the subject of our study is the dupes and those who dupe them, the alienated, and that if there are white men who behave naturally, when they meet Negroes, they certainly do not fall within the scope of our examination. If my patient's liver is functioning, if my patient's liver is functioning as it should, I'm not going to take it for granted that his kidneys are sound. Having found the liver normal, I leave it to its normality, which is normal, and turn my attention to the kidneys. As it happens, the kidneys are diseased, which means simply that side by side with normal people who behave naturally in accordance with the human psychology, there are others who behave pathologically in accordance with inhuman psychology. And it happens that the existence of men of this sort have determined a certain number of realities to the elimination of which I should take to contribute here. Talking to Negroes in this way gets down to their level. It puts them at ease. It is an effort to make them understand us. It reassures them. The physicians of the public health services know this very well. 20 European patients, one after another, come in. Please sit down. Why do you wish to come to consult me? What are your symptoms? Then comes a Negro or an Arab. Sit here, boy. What's bothering you? What does it hurt, huh? When that is, they say, do not say. How do you feel? Good? No. To speak pidgin to a Negro makes him angry because he himself is a pidgin nigger talker. But I will be told there's no wish, no intention to anger him. I grant this, but it is just an absence of wish. This lack of interest, this indifference, this automatic manner of classifying him, imprisoning him, primitivizing him, decivilizing him, this makes him angry. If a man who speaks pidgin to a man of color or an Arab does not see anything wrong or evil in such behavior, it is because he has never stopped to think. I myself have been aware in talking to certain patients of the exact instant to which I began to slip. Examining this 73-year-old farm woman whose mind was never strong and who was now far gone in dementia, I am suddenly aware of the collapse of the antenna in which I touch and through which I am touched. The fact that I adopt a language suitable to dementia, to feeble-mindedness, the fact that I talk down to this poor woman of 73, the fact that I condescend to her my quest for a diagnosis are the stigmata of the derelication in my relations with other people. What an idealist people will say. Not at all. It is just that the others are scum. I make it a point always to talk to so-called bigots in normal French. And I have always been understood. They answer me as well as their varying means permit. But I will not allow myself to resort to paternalistic understanding. Good morning, pal. Where's it hurt, huh? Let me see belly ache, heart pain. With that indefinable tone that the hacks in the face free clinics have mastered so well, one feels perfectly justified when the patient answers you in the same fashion. You see, I wasn't kidding you. That's just the way they are. When the opposite occurs, one must retract one's pseudopodia and behave like a man. The whole structure crumbles. A black man who says to you, I am in no sense your boy, monsieur, something new under the sun. But one must go lower. You are in a bar in Rouen or Strasbourg, and you have a misfortune to be spotted by an old drunk. He sits down at your table right off. You, Africa, Dakar, Rusfique, Warhouse, Dames, Cafe, mangoes, bananas. You stand up and leave, and your farewell is a torrent of abuse. You didn't play big shot like that in your jungle, you dirty nigger. Benoni has described what he calls the Prospero complex. We shall come back to these discoveries, which will make it possible to understand the psychology of colonialism. But we can already state that to talk pidgin nigger is to express this thought. You better keep your place. And I'm going to stop it right there with my reading, but I do want to get these final key points, right? Mimicry is not freedom, despite all we just read, right? Because what he's getting at is Black people have been taught that the way they naturally speak, the way they culturally speak is beneath the European, and to be equal or even respected or even to be acknowledged by the European as a human being or even close to a human being, you have to come as close to speaking the proper French or the proper English or the proper Dutch or the proper Spanish as possible. Or you will forever be an infidel. You will forever be a savage. You will forever be primitive. And assimilation in the Black man's mind is the only way to be accepted. But mimicry is not freedom. Mastering the colonizer's language does not lead to real equality. It leads to more degradation. It leads to more pathology. It leads to more stress. It leads to more separation from your culture, separation from your people, separation from your lineage. It only gives the illusion of inclusion, while Black people are still seen as the other, still seen as less than, still seen as a monkey, still seen as the link between monkeys and man being white man, right? Imitating white speech does not protect Black people from racism. It does not. It does not. It might give you some crumbs off the table, but it will not protect you from racism, right? So Frantz Fanon's main argument in chapter 1, right? In this first chapter, the main argument is the black man's adaptation of the colonizer's language is not a natural act. It is a psychological submission. Speaking French fluently is often seen as gaining respect, but it also signifies an attempt to shed one's blackness and gain acceptance into a white-dominated world that will never fully accept them, right? So remember this. Fanon, in this chapter, he's brilliantly showing us how language becomes a tool of colonial domination, right? Shaping not only how black people are seen by others, but how they see themselves. We're asked to consider, he asked us to consider this in this chapter. What does it cost a person to be understood if they must abandon their identity in the process? One more time. What does it cost a person to be understood if they have to abandon their identity in the process? Chapter 1, Black Skin, White Mask, Frantz Fanon. That's what we is. It's in the books. Let's get it. Make sure you get your copy. Link is in the description for you to get your copy of Black Skin, White Mask. This is chapter 1, language. Chapter 1, the Negro and language. Black Skin, White Mask. Remember, start on page 17. So it goes from page 17 to page 40. So make sure you get your copy of the book and you get to reading and you get into it. Remember, our key points were language is power and identity, the internalization of inferiority, the link between language and alienation, the role of education, the Negro as object in language, the psychological effect of language, and mimicry is not freedom. And remember, our final point is, what does it cost, or our final question is, what does it cost a person to be understood if they must abandon their identity in the process? Hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share. Make sure you support everything that got going on. And big shout out, big thank you to me, Kim. You are the greatest. You are the greatest. I appreciate your continued support. Thank you, me, Kim. Thank you to everybody who continues to support on the Shoulders of Giants. I love you all. Shout out to my mama. Shout out to my mama. She be watching all my videos. I appreciate you. I love you all, and I'll catch y'all on the other side. Make sure y'all catch the next video. Comment.